Hi BookTube, I'm here with my top 12 books of 2014. This is part 1, where I'll be talking about my favorite books from January until May. I'll put a link to the other video in the description bar that will be from June to December. So, the way I've decided to do this is that I'm just going to tell you my favorite books from each month. Kind of give you a very, very basic plot summary, and why I liked the book. Okay, so there's 3 different criteria I used for saying whether I liked a book or not. First and foremost is the writing style. You know, if plot and characterization are not necessarily there, as long as the writing style is, it can trump all the other books on the list. It could be vice versa too. If it's the best book plot-wise or character-wise, if the writing style is just not doing it for me, then I won't like it. So we're talking about, you know, word choice, sentence fluency, voice, and that just certain je ne sais quoi, you know, can't quite put your finger on why you like it or not. It just appeals to you as a reader. Secondly is characterization. Mostly is the progression of the character believable, in line with them at the beginning of the book. You know, I understand that characters change, but is it a believable change, and does it make sense? There are many books that I've come across that don't make sense. But that's another video. And we're not necessarily talking about likable characters. I love unreliable characters and bad characters and all that stuff as well. And lastly is plot. You know, it doesn't necessarily make a huge impact on the reading, whether it's a good plot or not for me, but I just like the plot to be believable or explainable within the universe. You know, like each book is its own universe, unless they say specifically this is taking place in the real world, you know, kind of thing. Okay, so enough talking there. I'm gonna start off with January. My favorite book in January was a complete surprise to me. First off, because I watched the movie first. I had no interest in reading the book. And secondly, it's a YA novel, which usually doesn't make my list of favorite books. So this is How I Live Now by Meg Rossoff. It's about a young American girl named Daisy who gets shoved off onto her cousins over in England at the beginning of World War III. They get separated, and the main plot of the story is that they have to get back to one another. There's also a dose of magical realism with mind reading and this sort of super sympathy type aspect. So it also deals with issues of anorexia, mental health, incest, family issues, and war, obviously. But I really liked it because it's not a war that takes place in a fantasy realm or a war that takes place in the past or in another country. You know, it's not at a distance. You feel like it could happen to you, and the way that it affects her physically, emotionally, all those other aspects. But what I really love about this novel is the writing style. It is a very stream of consciousness type style, first-person narrative. Grammar at some points is just thrown out the window, and it's just like, here, you know, deal with it. You're in this person's mind dealing with them. I also really like the progression and the character of Daisy, the main character, because this is, you know, a dystopian YA novel, but it's not your typical one in that there's a reason for, you know, a one person or a corporation or something behind, you know, what's going on. It's, you know, it's war. It's, you know, it's what happens when governments disagree with one another and, you know, start attacking each other. And she doesn't have to save the world. She just has to save herself. And I really, really liked that aspect of it. Yes. How I Live Now. January. Done. Okay. February. My favorite book in this month is no surprise. It's House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danilevsky. Oh my gosh. What can I say about this book? It's experimental metafiction. The plot is quite complicated, but basically there's kind of three different storylines going on. We have Zampano, who is writing the Navidson's record. The Navidson record is about a family who buy a house that may or may not have been built by Time Lords, in that it is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, and they're not the only people living there. And then we have the story of Johnny Truant, who is kind of editing this whole story. And there's lots more happening. I don't want to spoil it. Read it. So they all kind of intertwine. At its core, though, I believe it's a story about family and about love. And it's just, you know, very basic. I like that it was written in a lot of different styles. So you have the kind of like the scholarly style where you got all the citations and the quotations and everything going on, and it's kind of like very straightforward. And then you get things like diary entries or letters or just kind of random thoughts and tangents going on. Yes. But what really, really astounded me about this book is the effort that Danilevsky put into it. If you read this book, when you're done with it, look up the different codes and everything in it, and I'll put a link to the one that really helped me out in the description bar down below, because I still have it saved in my bookmarks. It's just amazing, the codes and everything that he doesn't point out to you but are there and that affect the story. And, you know, you get all these theories. You know how there's like fan theories for like Harry Potter and all that? Danilevsky actually put them into his book, but without telling you. You have to kind of find them yourselves. That's why it's good to have like these websites that kind of tell you where to look and everything. Okay. House of Leaves. In March I read the Canada Reads selections, and there was a close call between the Orenda by Joseph Boyden. I thought it was on the shelf, but it's not. And Cockroach by Robbie Hodge, but Cockroach won over because the writing style was just so much more beautiful. It was the runner-up in Canada Reads 2014. It's the awesome story of a young immigrant who has mental health issues. He actually believes he's a cockroach, hence the title. And it takes place in Montreal, so there, you know, you get the kind of like French interwoven with the English, because I think he's primarily English speaking. But I really liked it because it was a really unreliable narrator. We're in the mind of someone who has mental health issues, who slips between, you know, lucid thoughts and delusions. And you're not quite sure what's true and what's not true when you're reading the book. And Robbie Hodge did a beautiful job at that. Okay, April. This is the month that I read a lot of science fiction, a lot of classic science fiction, which I love. I jump on that stuff and gobble it up. And Jurassic Park just barely made it onto the list, because it was a more recently written novel and whatever, but it actually was my favorite novel of the month. I'm pretty sure you all know what Jurassic Park is about. It's about dinosaurs. And, you know, I really liked the the environment. The science is really quite well explained. I don't know how accurate it is because I'm not a scientist, but I thought it was really cool to kind of have it kind of explained in that way. And it was a great suspense of like the science, the drama, the suspense, and dinosaurs. I mean, I know watching the movies, you know, you get kind of creeped out, like what if there are raptors in the hallway or whatever, but the book does a great job of doing that as well. And this is definitely a book that you read for the plot, for sure. Okay, May, the last month for this video, my favorite book was This Is My Country, What's Yours? A Literary Atlas of Canada by Noah Richler. Excuse me if I say Mordecai Richler. Noah Richler is his son. He's a prominent Canadian author. Mordecai Richler is a prominent Canadian author. This is actually the only nonfiction book on my list. I'm not a big fan of nonfiction, but I really did read a lot of good ones this year, and definitely This Is My Country, What Is Yours is my favorite one of the year. So basically, Richler traveled around Canada talking to different Canadian authors about how their environment affects their writing. So we're not just talking about, you know, environment. I mean, the physical aspect of where you're living and writing, natural, the buildings, the people around you, the history and how those places came to be and how they were set up, and what effect they have on writing. And I can just say I really enjoyed this book because of how much I learned about Canada. I mean, I've studied Canadian history all throughout school, and there was so much in here that I learned about that I had no idea, you know, about like these factory towns and mining towns and how all these things happened. And he had me constantly going to the computer to look up more information about these things that he was mentioning. And it really is a great novel it's not a novel, it's a really great book that kind of examines that aspect of how the physical environment affects what you're writing, and how you write and what you write about and all this stuff. And it's just a great book. Even if you're not Canadian, I'd say read this book just because, you know, it kind of surpasses that at times to talk about how writing in a city is different versus writing in the mountains, or writing in one location, you know, at the East Coast is different from writing at the West Coast. Those kind of things. It's really, really interesting. Yes, so I'll link the second video down below. I don't want to be talking forever. But let me know what your favorite books of the year are in the comments down below. And if you have anything to say about what I'm reading or saying here, let me know. Remember to keep on reading. It's a thumbs up instead of a peace sign. I don't know why. I'll do both. Okay. Hey, you might want to check out Pickle's Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and other social media links in the description bar underneath.